I now kindly invite the President of the Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, Dr. Srilal De Silva, to introduce the orator of the C.C. De Silva Memorial Oration.
First Lady, Madam Shanti Wickramasinghe Rajapaksa, Chairpersons and the members of the Board of Trustees of Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, past presidents, honorary fellows and members of Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, members of the family of late Professor C.C. De Silva, ladies and gentlemen. I now have the pleasure of introducing our orator, Dr. Duminda Samarasinghe. He obtained his MBBS from University of Colombo in 1997 with second-class honors. He passed Diploma in Child Health examination with gold medals for the best performance in 2002 and passed MD Pediatrics in 2004. He was the first pediatric cardiology trainee in Sri Lanka. He was trained in pediatric cardiology in Royal Children's Hospital, Melbourne, and Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences and Research in India. He was appointed as a consultant in charge of the cardiology unit of Leitridge Hospital in Colombo in 2008. Duminda is an outstanding clinician, researcher, and a teacher. His vision and untiring efforts and his dedication has made it possible for the cardiology unit of the Leitridge Hospital to reach greater heights within a short span of time. Duminda has participated as a resource person in a number of local and international workshops, conferences, seminars related to pediatric cardiology, and also trainer in advanced pediatric life support courses. He has many publications to his credit in prestigious journals. He was the recipient of Dr. Reddy's Research Award in Cardiology for the year 2009. He was invited speaker at the 6th World Congress of Pediatric Cardiology and Cardiac Surgery in 2013 in Cape Town, South Africa. He is an active member of several professional organizations. He was the Honorary Secretary of the Sri Lanka Heart Association in 2009-10 and 2012-13, and Honorary Secretary to the Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians in 2010-11. He is the Sri Lankan country delegate for Asia Pacific Pediatric Cardiac Society. Duminda is much loved and respected teacher at training courses for MD Pediatrics and a visiting lecturer of Kothalavala Defence Academy. He is a life member of Sri Lanka Medical Association and Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians. His passion for technology has resulted in clinical databases, which he personally designed and created for the use initially at the Pediatric Cardiology Unit and now expanded to Cardiothoracic Unit, Cardiac Intensive Care Unit, and Medical Intensive Care Unit, where I work. This has enabled accurate collection and storage of data of patients and also contributed to improve the quality of the services provided. He pioneered the Children's Heart Project of Sri Lanka and is serving as the chairman of the project since 2012 to date. His untiring effort in attracting donors and fundraising activities for purchase of required equipment and devices have brought the hope of life of little patients with heart defects at the Leitridge Hospital. Duminda is also a talented photographer. He can be found trekking through jungles in his leisure. He has a great sense of humor and an excellent orator, a fact which he will prove soon. With his vast experience in pediatric cardiology and as a founder pediatric cardiologist of the Leitridge Hospital, I believe he is eminently and qualified to speak on his chosen topic. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to present Professor C.C. De Silva Oration Medal of Honor to Dr. Duminda Samarasinghe to deliver his oration on pediatric cardiology in Sri Lanka yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
First Lady, Madam Shiranthi Wickramasinghe Rajapaksa, President, members of the Council of Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, distinguished guests at the head table, members of the family of Professor C.C. De Silva, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Shamli Charles De Silva, born on 25th February 1904, had his early education at St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, and entered Ceylon Medical College in 1922. After spending a few years in the medical college, he joined University College of London and King's College Hospital and graduated MRCS LRCP in 1928. He left again to the UK in 1929 and acquired MRCP London and returned to Ceylon in 1931. In 1931, he returned to London to study for the MD, and a year later he was back in Ceylon. In 1949, he joined the Faculty of Medicine, University of Ceylon, as the first professor of pediatrics. His main clinical interests were nutritional disorders, hemoglobinopathies, and infective diarrheas. He was instrumental in setting up convalescence home at Thalagolla for nutritional rehabilitation of malnourished children together with Dr. L.O. Aberatna. He was a pioneer in the field of family planning, contributing extensively towards it from about the mid-60s. He was a wide-angle clinician and a great researcher. He held many posts in numerous professional organizations, both nationally and internationally, and also in government and non-governmental organizations. Pioneering work done by Professor C.C. De Silva would have definitely contributed to the very low infant and childhood mortality figures that we have achieved today in Sri Lanka. When I read about Professor C.C. De Silva when preparing for this oration, I could not find a single sentence related to pediatric cardiology. But ladies and gentlemen, unless Professor C.C. De Silva, as the first professor of pediatrics, and generations of his students that followed him, thought about the major killers at that time, like malnutrition and diarrheal illnesses, and brought them down to record low levels in the region, I would not be able to stand here today to speak to you about pediatric cardiology. Therefore, I consider Professor C.C. as a person who was instrumental in laying a firm foundation to what we are building today. I consider this as an honor and privilege to be able to deliver this year's Professor C.C. De Silva oration. And I thank the President and the Council for giving me this opportunity. Pediatric cardiology in Sri Lanka, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. As a practicing pediatrician for last 5 years, and being in the field for last 10 years, and after observing how things have progressed over last 10 years, can I say I am not afraid of tomorrow, for I have seen yesterday and I love today? Well, naturally, there are a few questions that run through my mind whenever I think about tomorrow. Can we care for all children with congenital heart diseases? Can it be totally free of charge at the cost of 1 billion rupees a year to the government? Do we have the manpower and money to do all this? Is there any room for improvement from what we are doing today, and can we be more cost effective? Well, I always believe where there is a will, there is a way. This was Taichi Ohno. He joined Toyota Motor Corporation in 1943. When he joined Toyota Motor Corporation in 1943, Toyota was not doing well at all. But the reforms he made to Toyota Motor Corporation, including just-in-time production and many other reforms, has made Toyota Motor Corporation today the leading motor manufacturing company in the world. When AirAsia provides the same facility as Singapore Airlines, that is, transporting people from one location to another at a fraction of cost that is charged by Singapore Airlines, do they compromise on safety? This is McLaren's team at pit stop changing the 4 tires of a Formula One car in 2.3 seconds. That happened in Germany last year. But Red Bull did it even better. They changed all 4 tires at a pit stop in Malaysia in 2.05 seconds. Imagine 2.05 seconds. Did they compromise on quality and safety when they did it fast? This is Boeing 737 production line. Well, their target is to do it fastest, highest quality, and at lowest cost every time the task is performed. As clinicians who take care of children with heart diseases, is our target different? This is Dr. Devi Shetty. When cardiac surgery costs $30,000 US in US and $5,000 US in private hospitals in India, Devi Shetty opens up a hospital where heart surgery costs just $800. When I analyze all these examples and many more and think about tomorrow, well, this is what I think. Care for all children with congenital heart diseases is most likely. Totally free of charge, yes, but I am hesitant a little bit at that, at 1 billion rupees a year, or probably even less. Do we have room for improvement? Can we be more cost effective? I think so. Why do I think so? Because by looking at the things that is happening today, when we want to fly, we get motorbikes to fly. We have cath labs which sleep for 16 hours a day. We order consumables in January, which will be used in December, and we pay in advance, 12 months in advance, and use them in December. When we want to pull a cart, we get a monkey, and we have to train that monkey to pull a cart. Well, over next 40 minutes, my task is to prove what I have said up to now. Before coming into that, it's my duty to introduce you to pediatric cardiology. So what is pediatric cardiology? I got the best explanation from Royal College of Physicians. They say, role of a pediatric cardiologist is to treat patients of all ages with congenital heart disease and those with acquired heart diseases in childhood. It is a highly technical field with great diversity, and it crosses many medical boundaries. We treat patients from fetus to adulthood, and we span from clinical diagnosis to ultrasound diagnosis to radiological diagnosis. Well, our treatment spans from medical management to interventions. History. How did it all start? Well, this is the first description of a congenital heart disease. In 1513, when dissecting human bodies was banned by the religion at that time, Leonardo da Vinci used to dissect bodies against the law. During one of these dissections, he has noted, as he describes, a perforating channel between the left atrium and right atrium. So this becomes the first description of a congenital heart disease. Since then, there were numerical descriptions on various clinical features and various pathological conditions in congenital heart disease. But when Robert Gross dilated the first patent ductus arteriosus in 26 August 1938, pediatric cardiology was born as a specialty. So in 3 weeks' time, we can celebrate the 75th anniversary of birth of pediatric cardiology. This clearly highlights the important relationship of pediatric cardiac surgery to pediatric cardiology. So how did it develop after that? Well, many developments took place in pediatric cardiology as well as cardiac surgery. USA identified pediatric cardiology as a separate specialty in 1960, Cuba in mid-1980s, India in mid-1990s, and Sri Lanka in 2004. When should a country introduce a pediatric cardiology is $1 million question. As we all know, heart diseases is the #1 killer among children, or #1 or #2. So then why not start a pediatric cardiology program? Well, in our region, we have even more dangerous killers like diarrheal illnesses, respiratory illnesses, and whatnot. Then, when should a country start a pediatric cardiology program? Well, the best example comes from Cuba, the scientific way of starting a pediatric cardiology program. In Cuba, they have observed as the infant mortality rate dropped from around 35 in 1970s to a value below 20 in 1980s, they have observed that congenital heart diseases has emerged as a major killer among infants. So, in 1984, they started their pediatric cardiology program, and since then, infant mortality rate gradually declined to a level below 5, and it has lasted at a level of 5 over past 4 years. What about India? They started their cardiology program in 1990s when the infant mortality rate was 80. So what was the basis in India? Well, in India, it was purely because some pediatric cardiologists who were trained abroad came back to India and they saw that there was no facility for even the patients who could afford treatment in private sector. So it was not a government-sponsored program, it is purely a private sector program. What about Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka was a little bit similar to Cuba. We started our program when the infant mortality rate dropped to below 20 in 2004. But it was not based on infant mortality rate. It was because the pediatric board of study has changed the curriculum in 2001, and with the introduction, with the passing out of first batch of pediatricians in 2004, we were lucky to get these subspecialties. I should thank at this moment to the board of study, as well as the pediatricians and the cardiologists who have raised their voice to make these subspecialties and make pediatric cardiology a separate specialty. So we started in 2004. So we landed in 2004, but there were many things happening even before that. The first cath lab in Sri Lanka, it was basically a screening unit, was installed at Valisara in 1968. Cardiology unit was established in 1972. First echocardiography machine came into the country, a M-mode machine in 1973, and a decade later we got the first 2D machine in 1983, and the first board-certified cardiologist was appointed in 1984, and that was my trainer, Dr. Narendran. So, what was the gravity of the problem at that time? This study, which was published in Ceylon Medical Journal, clearly highlights the gravity of the problem. This was done at Professorial Unit in Pediatrics, done by Professor Pujitha Wickramasinghe, Professor Sanath Lamabadasuriya, and Dr. Narendran. All three of them are in this audience today. So they conclude the mortality rate, among the children in the unit, there have been a mortality rate of around 16 to 30% in Professorial Pediatric Unit due to cardiac conditions. And they say, unless surgical care for patients with congenital heart disease in public sector are improved, I highlight in public sector are improved, many such children will continue to die early due to lack of facilities. So what is the current situation? What is the disease burden? Well, as you all know, incidence of congenital heart disease is about 6 to 8 per 1,000 live births. And number of live births in Sri Lanka is close to 400,000 a year. So we are expecting around 2,400 to 3,200 children to be born every year with a heart disease. And out of that, 2/3, that is about 2,000 patients, will need surgery or intervention. And the good thing about it is, with treatment, with modern treatment, nearly 90% of them will reach adulthood. So with this background, Pediatric Cardiology Unit was established at Ledridge Hospital in 1999 with the appointment of Dr. Narendran as the cardiologist with one medical officer and an attendant. In 2001, we got the ward, a 24-bedded ward, and 2005, the catheterization laboratory. Things didn't stop there. With the pediatric cardiologists who were trained in pediatric cardiology coming back to the country, they were appointed to various hospitals in the country. So, at the moment, we have 6 pediatric cardiologists working at 5 centers covering the whole country. So, what have we been doing all this time in pediatric cardiology? Well, we will look at the LRH figures. This is cardiology unit this is Ledridge Hospital, and this is our cardiology unit. It has 3 basic components: the clinic, the ward, and the catheterization laboratory. Our outpatient clinics are always busy. Our average clinic attendance is about 80 to 90 patients a day. It can vary from 50 to 150 patients depending on whether it's a clinic day or a non-clinic day. But our waiting time for cardiac evaluation is 0. The line is there. It's 0. So how do we see 50 to 150 patients in a clinic? Well, we work as a team. We have a nurse who will register the patients as they come in. Then the patient comes for evaluation. The cardiologist does a quick clinical examination and he does the echocardiogram. There's a nurse to keep the child calm and quiet, and there are 2 doctors to enter the record into the database, and there is an attendant to coordinate everything. And once the diagnosis is made, the patient goes to another medical officer who has special qualifications in genetics and who explains the condition to the parents and the outcome. We work like Lewis Hamilton pit stop. That is how we see 150 to 150 patients in a clinic. What about in the West? They see 10 patients in a clinic. The cardiologist herself will have to distract the child, examine the patient, do the echo, write the report, explain the condition to the parent, give the next appointment, and send the patient off. So it is similar to changing your tire all by yourself. So which one is better? We have analyzed our databases of 40,000 patients who have come to our clinic. Well, you can see majority of them were referred before 1 year of age, which is a very good indicator of good care in the country. We have analyzed patterns of referrals to cardiology unit in 2008. Well, most of them were referred, 80% were referred because of a murmur. And you can see when they were referred early, the chances of detecting a positive diagnosis, having a positive diagnosis is high. And if it was due to a murmur, the positive predictive value of a murmur was 40%, and positive predictive value of cyanosis was 90%. What about the ward? Well, the ward is always full. Bed occupancy rate is above 90, sometimes going above 100%. We get about 2,000 admissions a year, and they get admitted for either catheter interventions, surgery, or medical management. When they get admitted for catheter interventions, they spend 2.6 days in the hospital from admission to discharge. And when they get admitted for surgery, they spend 10 days in hospital, that is before going for the surgery. That clearly highlights that there are long waiting lists for surgery. This was our catheterization laboratory in 2005. This is how it looks today, a very busy catheterization laboratory. From the inception in 2005, we have done 6,300 procedures. The mean weight of all these procedures was 14.4 kilos, ranging from 1.9 to 67 kilos. Median age was 4.49 years, ranging from 1 day to 54 years. 8% of cases were more than 12 years of age. You might wonder how we do more than 12 years patients in a pediatric facility. Well, according to the Royal College of Physicians, pediatric cardiologists have to treat patients of all ages with congenital heart disease. So we got special permission from the director, and we are continuing to treat patients, and these patients are referred by either adult cardiologists or adult cardiothoracic surgeons for evaluation. Out of the procedures that we have performed, the 6,300 procedures, 66% were interventional, 33% were diagnostic, and 1% were radiological procedures done by radiologists. We have done few hybrid interventions with the surgeon because we work very closely with the surgeon. This is the number of catheterizations done by district of residence. When you look at this, you might think that we have given preference to Colombo, Gampaha, Kurunegala, and Kalutara over Mullaitivu, Mena, and Kilinochchi. Well, if you take the percentage of population versus percentage of cats, you will see we have not done anything different. It is because the population is less in those districts. We have treated all districts equally, and we deliver a national service. We started in 2006 with 600 catheterizations, and we have reached a plateau of around 1,000 cardiac catheterizations over past 3 years. Our waiting time for catheterization is less than 2 months, and we were the only catheterization laboratory to provide 24-hour, 365-day service. We were the first catheterization laboratory to start 24-hour service in this country. That was the vision of Dr. Narendran, who was there when the catheterization laboratory was started. So, if it is an emergency, we can do it on the same day itself. Well, what are the common procedures we have done? ASD device closure was the commonest procedure that we have performed, and we have done 1,716 ASD device closures. This is the device we use. It costs 175,000, and the sheath costs another 40,000. So it's a costly procedure. We have to spend about 1 hour to finish the procedure. This was our initial experience, initial first 2-year experience on ASD device closure. Well, majority of them, 55%, has undergone the procedure between 5 to 9 years of age, and more than 70% were females. And our success rate at that time was only 82%. So we analyzed the reasons for our failures. Well, when we want to close a hole in a membrane, we need adequate margins all around the hole. So when the margins were suboptimal, obviously we have failed. When the defect was large, again we have failed, and the failure rate was much higher during the initial 100 cases compared to the balance 160. Did the failures remain at the same level? No, our successes have improved from 82% in 2006 to 100% in 2013. And fluoroscopy time is the time which we screen them under X-ray guidance during the procedure. So all over the world, the target is to minimize the fluoroscopy time. Our fluoroscopy time was around 15 minutes in 2005, but it has come to a level below 4 minutes in 2013 and 2012. This is the second commonest procedure that we have done in the cath lab, closure of PDA. We have done 1,630 of them. We either use a single coil, or 2 coils tied together, or 2 or 3 coils, or a device depending on the anatomy and the preference of the operator. This is our use of single coils, multiple coils, and PDA devices. There's marked variation depending on the year. The success rate of PDA closures again has gone up from around 80% in the initial 2 years to a value above 98% towards the latter part. We have done rare procedures. I'll show you a few. This is closure of aortopulmonary window, a very rare procedure to be performed in a catheterization laboratory. We have done 6 of them. We do newborn procedures. This is perforation of pulmonary valve in pulmonary atresia, a very demanding procedure because you have to perforate the valve with a guide wire, and the guide wire can perforate any cardiac structure. So it's a technically demanding procedure. We have done 18 of them. We do coronary procedures, but not like adult coronary procedures. When there's a fistula, we go ahead and close them. We have done 9 coronary AV fistula, again a very rare procedure. Well, we step out of the heart and encroach into other areas as well. This is closure of a pulmonary AV fistula, pulmonary to aorta, aorta to pulmonary artery collateral. This child was ventilator dependent. After 5 days after closing the collateral, he was extubated. We work with the surgeons, so we do hybrid procedures. It may be, this is an example of right ventricular outflow tract perforation or pulmonary valve perforation done together with a surgeon in the cath lab. What are the complications in cardiac catheterization? Well, complications are very rare. It can vary from a simple hematoma at the groin or to death on table. Incidence of major complications like deaths and major disability varies from 0.14 to 11% according to various studies. So what are our complication rates? This is our major complications, and significant complications are very rare. We have taken major complications as complications that has led to death or permanent disability, and significant complications as complications which has led to change in procedure, including addition of surgery or some other procedure, are taken as significant complications. The complication rate is very low. This is the percentage of complication. At the center, it is not 50th centile, it is the 98th centile. So our major complication rate over past few years is less than 0.5%. So when we have done all these things, have we achieved the fastest, highest quality, lowest cost every time the task is performed, as I said, as our target should be? Well, when trying to do so, have we lowered the pole to show that we are jumping higher? Well, what is comparative data? This is fluoroscopy time trend, which I have shown to you. This was a study published in Journal of American College of Cardiology. According to that, the mean fluoroscopy time was 17 to 20.3 minutes. What was our fluoroscopy time? Median was 4.7 when you take the whole period, and mean was 7.1 minutes. Well, we have achieved the fastest or faster. So, complications in catheterization laboratory. By doing it fast, have we had more complications? Well, we have analyzed our first 2-year complications versus last 2-year complications. In the first 2 years, it was 0.83. In the last 2 years, it was 0.21%. Well, the incidence of major complications, according to various studies, ranged from 1.4 to 11%, and mortality ranged from 0.14 to 2.7. So, we have delivered safer care, and we were able to manage the highest quality standards. What about embolization of ASD devices? Once you place an ASD in the septum, a device in the septum, there is always a risk of embolization of the device. It usually happens within the first 24 hours. According to this study, which was published in Catheterization and Cardiovascular Interventions, the incidence of device embolizations is 0.55% and 1 in 200 at the best of hands. This is among the best experienced operators. What is our incidence? Overall incidence was 0.46. Last 1,000 cases, it was 0.3. Last 700 cases, 0.1. None for last 500 cases. So again, we have delivered safest possible care. What was the procedural attempt success rate? Device closure of ASD is not like surgery, where it will be 100% successful. Well, we can fail. If it was not the proper patient for the procedure, we will have to abandon the procedure midway. According to this study, which was published in JACC again, the procedural success rate was 95.7, and in most studies it was 95 to 98%. Our procedural success rate in the initial period was 83%. In 2012 it was 98.3. In 2013 it was 100%. So we were able to do it every time the procedure is performed. So we have achieved fastest, highest quality every time the task is performed. What about the lowest cost? Have we achieved the lowest cost? Well, this is the cost of the procedures that we have performed in year 2010 in our catheterization laboratory. We have did costing according to 2 conditions. 1, if the items are reused, and 2, if the items are not reused. So if the items are not reused, the cost of these procedures will be 161,330,000 Sri Lankan rupees. But as we reuse the items, the cost has come down to 85,930,000. We reuse the items after proper sterilization. That's not all. It's not only 85 million. We have to establish the cath lab and maintain the cath lab as well. So what is that cost? Cath lab alone costs 80 million. And the installation costs another 40 million. And it lasts only for 10 years. For the cath lab, we have to spend 8 million a year, installation 4 million a year, and there is service and maintenance agreement which costs another 8 million a year. So it comes to 20 million a year. So if you do 1,000 catheterizations in that cath lab per year, the cost per case is 20,000 rupees. And if you do 500 cases, the cost goes up to 40,000 rupees. And in private sector, we can get the procedure done at 35,000 rupees a case. So to be more cost effective, you have to do at least 1,000 cases a year. What about cost effectiveness of interventions? How do we say that this procedure is cost effective? Well, in US, a procedure which costs $50,000 US, and if that procedure gives 1 year of good quality life to the person, that is taken as a cost effective procedure. In the UK, it is £20,000 per quality adjusted life year. What is it for Sri Lanka? Well, WHO has given us a definition which says the cost of intervention, if it is less than per capita GDP per quality adjusted life year, that is a very effective procedure. if it falls between 1 to 3 times the per capita GDP per quality adjusted life year, that is an effective intervention. As all our procedures provide many years of quality life to those patients, 15, 30 years of quality life or even normal lifespan. All our procedures are very cost-effective procedures. What is our GDP? It is 2,923 according to World Bank data in 2012. So all our procedures are very cost-effective. Who spends for these procedures is the next question. Well, according to this World Bank publication on good practices in health financing, in middle-income countries, it is mainly private out-of-pocket or government 50-50 like. This was another publication by Ravi P. Rananelli and Lankani Sikurajapati. They have analyzed the actual figures from Sri Lanka. Well, according to them, in 2005, the latest figures that I could get, general government has spent 47% and private sector expenditure was 53%, and out of that, out-of-pocket expenditure was 49%. Patient has paid for their procedure in the sense any medical need, 49%. Is it the same for pediatric cardiology? Well, we have analyzed our supply of ASD device closures according to the source of device. Well, the cost of a device is 175,000 and we have analyzed 1,155 cases. You can see most of the devices were either provided by the government or the President's Fund with a small contribution from the patient, around 25,000 out of 175,000. So 99.65% of the time, it is either the government or the President's Fund who has provided the device. Why is it so when adult cardiology is such a lucrative business wherever in the world? Why can't they afford when they are pediatrics? In adults, they get the disease towards the retirement. They have enough financial reserves. Their children are earning or working abroad. They can send money for the parents. They have insurance cover. They get benefits from workplace. What about children? The parents are newly married. They have spent lavishly on their wedding, the balance during pregnancy for anomaly scan and to go to best private hospitals. By the time we detect a cardiac lesion, they don't have any reserves at all. They don't have any insurance cover. Even if they have insurance cover, unfortunately, congenital heart diseases are not covered under insurance. So they don't get any insurance benefits. They are not working as well. So are we working in isolation? When we did all these things, were we working in isolation? Well, in today's context, cardiac care is called comprehensive pediatric cardiac care. It is delivered by 3 basic teams: pediatric cardiology, pediatric cardiac surgery, and pediatric intensive care. We work all together like one team. There are various subdivisions in each division. Why did we develop a team approach? Because we have, over the last few decades, we have started treating more complex and newborn surgeries, and the imaging quality has developed, so even the intensivist or the surgeons can understand what we show to them. And with the development of interventional cardiology, we have to decide together whether the patient should go for surgery or interventions as a team. And with widening of knowledge, we can't be jack of all trades anymore. Are we experts? Why do you need a team approach? Look at this X-ray. It's a CT of the chest. Can you detect something? Well, you might not. This CT film was given by a psychology student to 24 expert radiologists this was hidden among 100 other CT scans. And can you see this? Can you guess how many of that 24 missed this hidden gorilla in the CT? The radiologists were asked to look for cancer nodules. So they were looking for cancer nodules, and out of that 24, 20 have missed this gorilla. That is why we need team approach in delivering care. So, what about pediatric cardiothoracic surgery and pediatric intensive care? Well, in 2007, we started our cardiac surgical program in Adelaide Ridgeway Hospital with a 6-bedded ICU, and in 2010, we added another 12-bedded HDU. Well, even before that, there were pediatric patients getting operated at National Hospital, Jayawardhanapura Hospital, or Karapitiya Hospital. And these were the figures given by Dr. Panna Gunaratna from Jayawardhanapura Hospital. From July 1995 to December 2007, they have done 3,412 open heart surgeries at Jayawardhanapura Hospital. But the issue there was the parents had to pay. So most of the patients, by the time they collected the money, the child has already expired. So our cardiac surgery program started in 2007, and they did around 250 cardiac surgeries in 2007, and it has gone up to 900 surgeries in last 2 years. Well, what is their mortality rate? What is the mortality rate in cardiac surgery at Lady Ridgeway Hospital? It is around 6.4, an overall mortality rate of 6.38%. Is it too high? Well, this study was published in Annals of Thoracic Surgery, and it says their overall mortality rate was 4.4, but that was overall, and mortality for open heart operations in newborns, it was 12.6. This is another interesting publication in 2009 in Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery. They say the Aristotle difficulty, when the Aristotle difficulty was more than 3, any cardiac surgery above ASDs will fall under Aristotle difficulty more than 3. Any PDA, even BT shunt, any BT shunt or even PA banding will fall under Aristotle difficulty more than 3. The mortality rate was 9.8. So we are well within the range. This was our intensive care unit in September 2005. This is how it looks today. We take care of mostly it is newborns. You can see most of them are newborns. You can't see them even, only the nurses. So as the intensive care unit was not adequate, 6-bedded intensive care unit was not adequate, we expanded, we laid the foundation stone in 2006 for a high dependency unit. And this is how it looks today. Again, it is mainly newborns. So newborn surgery in a unit indicates that it has advanced to that level. So what is tomorrow? What is tomorrow for pediatric cardiology in Sri Lanka? Well, Paul McCartney has said, think globally and act locally. So, over the next few minutes, I will be discussing with you about the future and how we should fashion our future on goals and forecast, cost forecasting, expansion of services in the most cost-effective way, purchasing of consumables, manpower and training and funding. What is our goal and what is the forecast? Well, our goal is to provide treatment for all children with heart diseases in a most appropriate, timely and cost-effective manner. Our target is to do 3,000 patients a year. Surgery, 2,000. Catheter interventions, 1,000. At the moment, we are doing 900 surgeries and 700 catheter interventions at Lady Ridgeway Hospital. So, how do we bridge the gap? What is the first cost forecast to provide that kind of a service? Well, for each cardiac surgery, consumables alone cost around 145,000. Drugs, equipment, maintenance, water, electricity, salaries, everything adds on to that. With that, the total cost goes up to around 400,000 per case. In private sector, it is around 600,000. So, to provide care for 3,000 children, how much money should we spend? Well, for surgery, 2,000 surgical cases, we need 800 million. Plus 1,000 catheter interventions, we need 200 million. And the total cost forecast is 1 billion Sri Lankan rupees. What is our health expenditure? Our health expenditure is around 50 to 70 billion per year. So, are we going to ask for 1.5% to 2% of annual health budget to treat these children with congenital heart diseases is the question. Well, I don't think it is justifiable to ask for 2% of health budget to treat one condition. Then what should we do? How should we expand the cardiac services in more cost-effective manner? Well, what about cardiac catheterization? We need 1,000 per year. At the moment, we are doing 700 a year. The balance is 300 a year. We have 4 catheterization laboratories at Kandy, Galle, Kurunegala and Jaffna. And if we do 2 cases per week, 50 weeks a year, at these 4 centers, we can bridge that gap. We'll be able to do 400 cases a year. But they are already working on adult patients in those catheterization laboratories. They are working 8 hours a day. Well, then how do we bridge this gap? Should we start a new catheterization laboratory, or should we extend the working hours from 8 to 12 in the existing catheterization laboratories? To establish a new catheterization laboratory, annual cost will be 20 million a year. If we extend the working hours and pay 20,000 rupees per case for each additional case, for 300 cases, we spend 6 million per year. That 6 million will stay in the country. This 20 million, 90% of that will go to either Japan, US, or Austria. The saving to the government is 14 million a year. Expansion of cardiac surgery. Target 2,000, gap 1,100. Population in Australia is similar to population in Sri Lanka. They have 6 cardiac centers, we have only 1. So, the knee-jerk response will be to go for 6 centers in Sri Lanka. But why should you start a center to cover a geographical area? Then, what is our geographical area compared to Australia? Well, it is 117 times smaller. So, do we need 6 centers? What is the other option? LRH? So, if we start at least 4 centers, we need 4 more operating rooms and 8 surgeons to manage those 4 centers. But if we expand the services at LRH from 2 operating rooms to 4 operating rooms, with addition of another 2, 3 surgeons to 5 surgeons, and introduce after-hours surgery, and get the maximum of visiting teams who are willing to visit and operate on short periods of time, we will be able to reach that 2,000 target. And more than everything, this study clearly shows that if centers do smaller number of cases, the mortality rate is very high. So if you are given a chance to go to a center which is close to your house and which has a mortality rate of 14% versus a center 300 kilometers away, for once in for a lifetime surgery, which center will you prefer? So we have to think about all these things. Now, in the UK, they are reviewing their cardiac services. This is called Safe and Sustainable Review. What they say is they need at least 4 surgeons in a pediatric cardiothoracic center to provide proper service. They say services have developed on ad hoc basis in the past, and smaller centers are not sustainable into the future and cannot provide best possible care. So, they are trying to bring down the 11 cardiothoracic centers in the UK down to 6 centers because it is not cost effective to have so many centers. In Sri Lanka also the same thing has happened. Knowingly or unknowingly, 2 centers that were in Ratnapura and Jaffna got closed off after some time because due to lack of manpower and resources. So, we have to think, are we going to repeat the history again? Supply of consumables. Do we have the best system in the world? Is the question. Well, the origin of the system that we use today, or called the tender procedures commonly, it originated when the transport was like this, when the communication was like this, and when the orders were placed like this. But what is it today? Transport is like this, it's very fast, communication happens in seconds, and ordering happens through computers. We will see a simple tender procedure, ordering ASD devices for next year. How am I going to predict ASD devices that I need for 2014? Well, this is our usage. In 2009, we have used 150. In 2011, we have used 400. The cost of a device is 175,000. Am I going to order 400 or 150 for 2014? And more than everything, we used 22 different sizes of device. So how much from each size is the next question. If you see the commonly used sizes even, there is so much of variation between sizes. So how much to order from each size is a question. We know there are issues with all these tender procedures, high initial investment, forecasting errors, storage, withdrawals from the companies, inventory maintenance, quality, late delivery, wastage. These are few examples of wastage. These masks were probably bought because they were the lowest tender, and see what happens to the mask when they wear. It breaks off. So every person uses at least 2 masks on a day. So the usage becomes double. These were the syringes that we get. Every time I do a hand injection, I injure my hand because this breaks off. These devices are 16 and 18 millimeter VSD devices. Nowhere in the world we use 16 and 18 millimeter sizes for closure of perimembranous VSDs. That procedure is abandoned now. Each device is 250,000 and we have 40 devices which is worth of 10 million rupees. We got this stock about 3 years back. This is the puncture needle or the sheath that we use to enter the vein during the procedure, and this is what we got during a recent tender. That is why I said when we want to fly, we get motorbikes to fly. And thanks to these tender procedures, we have the world's largest number of coils at Laidridge Hospital, largest collection of coils. We have 350 coils which will be used for next 5 to 10 years. We have already paid for them. This was Taichi Ohno. When he joined Toyota Motor Corporation, it was also like this. He didn't make inquiries into why they have purchased this and why they have purchased that. He thought, as in supermarkets in US, where they don't stock many items, they replace the items once they are purchased by the customer. So the same thing was brought into Toyota Motor Corporation, which was called just-in-time manufacturing and later became Toyota system, which says right part at right time in right quality. It just comes into the production line. There's minimal storage. So why do you need to store? When the transport is so fast, when the communication is so fast, why do we need storage? So what do we do when we purchase ASD devices at LRH and when we don't have stocks from the government? Then we issue a letter to the President's Fund. The President's Fund agrees to release funds. Then the company supplies the device. On the day of the procedure, they bring all sizes of devices. We use one of them and President's Fund makes the payment. This is similar to just-in-time manufacturing. We don't store anything. It is the company's responsibility to provide the device at the correct time in right quantity at the right place. Well, Boeing went one step ahead. This is their 737 production line. They went into something called lean manufacturing. What do they do in lean manufacturing? They lean on other suppliers for parts. They identify certain suppliers and give them a minimum and maximum number of items that they should deliver in a month. With that, Boeing has reduced their production time by 50%. Now they produce a Boeing 737 in 11 days. So, what about manpower and training? Do we get the right man for the right job? If you compare pediatric cardiology and pediatric endocrinology as two separate specialties, what are the qualities needed in pediatric cardiology? What are the skills needed by a pediatric cardiologist? What are the skills needed by a pediatric endocrinologist? Well, pediatric cardiologists need to see in 2 dimensions and imagine in 3 dimensions because we do 2-dimensional echo and think about the heart in 3 dimensions. They need to do mathematical calculations. They have to have an idea about hydrodynamics because it's all related to blood flow. They need manual dexterity for cardiac catheterizations and hand-eye coordination. What about endocrinology? They need good knowledge and memory. They need to interpret data. They need good communication skills because they have to explain everything. They are chronic patients and so many other qualities which probably are not needed by a pediatric cardiologist. This was our batch when we passed out in 2004. Imagine if this person decides to do neurology or endocrinology with his very poor memory, what will happen to the trainer? The trainer will have to train this monkey to pull a cart. Will it be successful? Does it happen in all other fields? We'll take air traffic controlling. In air traffic controlling, they don't check your knowledge on air traffic controlling at entrance exam. They check the skills, basic skills required for an air traffic controller to become a good air traffic controller. What are those? English, obviously, because they communicate in English. Multitasking, because they have to do multitasking. They need good IQ, numerical skills, memory test, and voice test. Then they take them for training, teach them on air traffic controlling. At the end of 2 years, they have test on knowledge on air traffic controlling. So, can't we do the same? It's my personal opinion. So, what are the other problems with manpower? Well, it is even worse. To select, we don't get one. Pediatric cardiothoracic surgery was identified as a separate specialty 4 years back, but there are no takers. For past 4 or 5 years, there are no takers, even to select. And the nurses' problem is even a bigger problem. Nobody stays in intensive care unit because of the workload. So, manpower, unless we address it now, will become a major issue. What about funding? Well, we get funding mainly from the government and President's Fund and donors to a major extent. Parents and insurance companies do very little when it comes to spending on procedures. Insurance companies, no spending at all because congenital diseases are not covered under insurance. We were ranked, Sri Lanka was ranked as 8th best giving countries in World Giving Index in 2010. Because of that, we get a lot of donations. They can vary from food items for the parents, equipment, going up to even echocardiography machines, or computers to maintain our databases. It can be renovation of part of a building, or it can be a whole building itself worth of 50 million rupees donated by a single donor, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jafferji. Or we get concerts like this, thanks to Revelations, and we have so many pledges, 10 million rupees to establish a tissue bank in the future. The same person is ready to upgrade our databases into a proper database, training program for ICU nurses from Gift of Life, and funding for after-hours surgery from Gift of Life International. So there are so many pledges. We get so many donations. So ladies and gentlemen, what is future of pediatric cardiology? We have discussed goals and forecast, cost forecast, how to expand it in the most cost-effective way, whether we are doing the right thing when we are purchasing, what about manpower and funding. It is time to leave. Before I leave, I don't have a take-home message, but I have a take-home question. What is that question? Well, how have they improved? How did Red Bull and Boeing improved on their performance? Well, they collected data, they have analyzed it, they have planned, and they have restructured their process, and they have recollected data, reanalyzed. This went on in a cycle until they got the desired improvement. So where do we have data in health sector? Well, we have them in books, we have them in bid tickets, we have them in forms. Who will have time to analyze all these data that are given as in this format? In a little bit better centers, they will have data on computers, but mostly it will be as Word format for better expression or Excel format for some kind of analysis, very selected analysis, or at most in administrative databases which were basically designed for administrative purposes. So where do we have it data in our cardiology unit? We have data in specifically designed databases. These are clinical databases. So each component, each response goes to a separate cage so you can easily cross-tabulate and analyze data without much hassle. Who enters this data? It is the same category of staff which enters data into books and BHTs. The doctors, the nurses, or even the attendants if they are capable to do it. And they have improved in data entry over the period of time, and now their main complaint is the computers are slow. Earlier they were slower than the computers, now they are faster than the computers, because computers were the same. So, we have databases for cardiac catheterization, we have a database for echocardiography, we have another database for inward patients in cardiology unit, Another one for consumables that we use in the catheterization laboratory, where a nurse enters whatever the consumables that were used. And we have a database for morbidity and mortality meetings. Another one for intensive cardiothoracic intensive care unit. We have expanded it recently. Then the cardiothoracic surgery database. So everything goes into databases. These were based on a simple platform. We can call it a wooden platform. Now our next task is to make it out of steel. So it will last long, and that will be done by a single donor, again, whose name he doesn't want me to mention, but it will be done by him, and that database can be expanded. It will be a proper SQL database, can be expanded into any other field in the country. So ultimately, it has the capacity to become even a national database. So it is all your wish that we have to get to make it a national database. When we do not have data, what do we say? We say we do our best. We are overworked. How can we improve when we are already doing our best? Well, over past 40 minutes, I have shown you data and some analysis and a plan. Restructuring is not the duty of a poor cardiologist. It is the duty of the authorities. If we can do it, my question is, are we ready to make this change? Are we ready to change the system for the benefit of the country? So, at last, the verdict. Verdict should be yours. What is pediatric cardiology? What is it? What is its tomorrow? Care for all children with congenital heart diseases? I think it is most likely. Can it be totally free of charge? Yes, it should be totally free of charge, only for the deserving. Those who can pay, there should be a system where they could pay to the government. We should encourage more and more insurance schemes to come in and pay for the cost. Can it be at what? Can we pay 1 billion rupees a year? Well, probably if we incorporate patient payments as well as insurance schemes, we can do it at a cost lesser than 1 billion rupees. Well, before I end, I need to tell you about this boy. Why we should provide free of charge healthcare in cardiology. This boy has undergone a procedure in a private hospital 2 years back, developed a complication. Well, complications can happen anywhere, even in government sector, complications can happen. That was not the issue. The issue was the parents couldn't afford for further care in that private hospital. So he was brought into Laidridge Hospital, and one Saturday morning, he developed a cardiac arrest. He was given cardiac massage for 45 minutes and taken to the theatre. We usually stop cardiac massage at 30 minutes, but this was continued for 45 minutes. He was taken to the theatre, was operated, and this is how he looks 2 years after surgery. Well, whether you like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we have to provide care to these children to keep them smiling. It is our duty to optimize it and make the maximum benefit of what we are spending today. Before I step down, I need to acknowledge certain people in my life. My parents, sisters, and close relatives for bringing me up to this level. My wife, her parents, and 2 daughters for tolerating me and supporting me when I spent so much of time which I could have spent with them on work-related issues like creation of databases. My teachers from primary education to postgraduate education for their guidance and encouragement, and Dr. Deepthi Samarage for the 2 lengthy telephone calls which I received in 2004 March, which changed my interest from pediatric intensive care to pediatric cardiology. And Dr. Narendran for making me interested in pediatric cardiology. I should also mention our team at LRH and outside hospitals, Dr. Shehan Perra and Dr. Ruwan Morokkaral for their excellent support, and all medical officers in our unit for their outstanding work, all nurses down to minor staff, because each member is equally important in the team to provide a good outcome. Cardiothoracic and intensive care teams for their excellent work, a teamwork. All what I have presented today is the outcome of that team effort, not my own work. I also need to acknowledge all the pediatric cardiologists providing an excellent service at the periphery and all cardiologists and cardiothoracic surgeons who always support us when there is a need. And I need to mention about the Google Images for the fantastic images and YouTube for providing those videos. And last but not the least, all those who have contributed to free education in this country, because I am standing here today as a pediatric cardiologist thanks to that free education. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite the Honorary Secretary of the Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, Dr. Chamilka Jayasinghe, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I consider it a great privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on this most momentous of occasions. Before the curtain falls on this eve's proceedings, there are a number of individuals that need to be acknowledged. On behalf of the Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our First Lady, Madam Shiranthi Wickramasinghe Rajapaksa, a great benefactor of underprivileged children in Sri Lanka, for gracing this occasion. Thank you, Dr. Srilal De Silva, President, Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians, for your infinite determination as you work untiringly towards making your vision for the college a reality. Thank you to the Council, to the Board of Trustees, to the past presidents, and all members of the College of Pediatricians, especially those of the organizing committee, for your unstinted support and solidarity. Ayubowan to Dr. Janet Anderson, our chief guest, Dr. Ashok Diorari, our guest of honor, and all our overseas resource persons whose participation will invariably enrich our scientific congress this year. Our gratitude goes to Dr. Nihal Jayathilaka, Secretary, Ministry of Health. Sir, you have been a pillar of strength and a mentor to the college on many an occasion. Thank you to Dr. Ferdowsi Rustam Mehta, WHO representative to Sri Lanka, and Dr. Deepika Artigala, representing Dr. Riza Hosseini of UNICEF, for the near and dear affiliation you share with the college. Congratulations to Dr. Duminda Samarasinghe, our orator this evening, for his excellent delivery and for revolutionizing the course of pediatric cardiology in Sri Lanka. And thank you to the family of late Professor C.C. De Silva, in whose remembrance the oration was delivered. Thank you to all our very generous sponsors, GlaxoSmithKline, Astron, Bauer, Sandoz, Johnson & Johnson, LifeServe, Mead Johnson, Fonterra, Nestle, Dali Butler, Abbott, Demo, Getz Pharma, Technomedic, Sanofi, Ranbaxy, 7Cs, Interpharm, Indoscan, Global Hospitals, Glenmark, Emma Chemi, and Premium International. Our gratitude knows no bounds. The little people behind the wings who make all this pomp and pageantry possible. Our office staff, Rushtia and Madhu, our demonstrator, Dr. Dasun Vijay Surya, our usherers this evening, the SLMA staff. Thank you. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you to our compeer, Dr. Amaya Ellavala, on a job very well done. Thank you to the gracious staff of Hotel Galadari, with a special mention of Mr. Sudesh Gunasekara, the banquet manager, for being so very obliging. Thank you to Hiroshini and her team at AV Productions, our event manager for the Congress, for assisting me every step of the way. The final item on our agenda this evening is the performance by students of Lyceum International College. I thank these youngsters in advance for sharing the joy of youth with us. Finally, my task would not be complete if I did not thank all of you present here tonight. Thank you, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.